It's the second last talk on Ezekiel. I'm sure you'll be glad to know. I've got to say, I have learned so much reading Ezekiel. It's just been a fascinating trip through Israel's history, and so it's really cool to do it. We'll be looking at Hebrews in 2 weeks' time. Jamie, whose last name shall be withheld, lives in the UK, and he is the father of 15 kids to 13 different women. I should point that out. He thinks he's addicted to something. I'm not sure what he thinks he's addicted to. If I was the father of one of the 13 women he has had children with, I'm telling you that he wouldn't be having any more children, ever. You see, there's a reason I bring this up, aside from the lols of this fellow, whose mother says that he is a disgrace, and she says she just wants him to stop having babies with random women. The reason I bring this up is my children, I want them to have faithfulness. I want them to be faithful, but I want the people for them to be with to be faithful. It's the same thing I want for myself and for my wife. I want to be faithful to her, and I want her to be faithful to me. Faithfulness is the one thing that a relationship will fail without. You can have lots of things missing in a relationship, but if you don't have faithfulness in the relationship, well, that one's doomed, isn't it? Now, why are we bringing this up? You see, well, let's look at this passage first. We have the person Gog and the place Magog. We don't know where this place is. This is one of those places that it's got a name, but there's no map that says, oh, this is where it is. I have a lecturer who thinks that Magog is a cipher for Babylon. I'm quite willing to trust him on that one. But in the end, the idea is not that there is this literal place, but what we're getting here is this end times revelation, this picture of the enemies of the people of God arrayed against the people of God, and how that's going to end for them. Now, if you think about it, this is a very tricky issue for the people of Israel in the time of Ezekiel, when they are currently in Babylon, having been captured by Nebuchadnezzar. You see, they may very well be saying, where is the faithful God? Where is the faithfulness that you promised, O Lord? Now, we've been through, in Ezekiel, you go through and you see the faithfulness of God and the faithlessness of God's people. The unfaithfulness of God's people as they sin again and again and again. And that's the surprise of Ezekiel 38. Because up until now, when God has said a people is coming to attack Israel, he has been saying, and they're going to win. You know, Babylon is coming, they're going to attack Israel, and they're going to win. But in Ezekiel 38, God says, hey, enemies, I'm going to whistle for you guys to come here. And you're going to attack my people. And you're going to fall by the sword. Your bow will fall out of your left hand. Your arrows will fall out of your right. You will not be able to attack my people. And you will suffer judgment. The picture is, it's not just this one land, Magog, wherever that is, but it's the enemies of Israel. Look at the people who come. Persia, Cush, Put, wherever Put is. Cush is in Egypt. It's that Egyptian sort of area. The Persians were these, all these people all the nations that have gathered against Israel, they're going to be collected together and brought against Israel and then smashed. I said last week that this is a turning point for Ezekiel, for the book. Why? Because we begin to see the faithfulness of God. The faithfulness of God, which if you were an ordinary, average Israelite living in the land of Babylon, you know the promises of God. You know that God promised Abraham this wonderful land. You know that God says, I am bigger and better than any idol. I do not bow to the idols, they bow to me. And you would be saying, really? Because I'm still in captivity and I don't feel like the victor here. And so it takes 35 chapters of Ezekiel to get the point that you are actually there for a reason, and it's God's reason, and God is punishing the people because they have been so sinful. And then you've got to say, well, what happens next? What happens next? Why am I going to stay here? Or is something different in store for me? You see, up until now, when when the enemies of God's people have come against God's people, they have won. And here, Ezekiel says to the people, actually, that's not going to happen anymore. No more. The battle will not be won by your enemies. The battle will be won by me. And what is different is that now God is talking to his covenant people whom he has redeemed. So Ezekiel 37 talks about, when God says, I'll give my spirit to my people. And so he's talking to that people. He's talking to that generation and saying, you guys are going to live for me, and I am not going to continue to punish you. Well, what lies in store for you? You'll see in chapter 39 that, aside from the God killing all of the enemies, it's got some gruesome bits about all the birds of the air eating the bodies of the enemies, and people getting paid full-time jobs to go and collect the bodies of the enemies and then bury them. For 7 months, there's stacks of people being buried. You get this picture of a really, really gruesome battle. And then God says, I am now bringing Jacob, that is the people of God, back from captivity. That's chapter 39, verse 25. And I will have compassion on all the people of Israel, and I will be zealous for my holy name. God's re-establishing his people. And this time, it's not just people, but he's giving them his spirit. They're going to be people who want to obey him. They're going to be people who want his name to be holy. And so you see there, they will forget their shame and all of the unfaithfulness that they showed toward me when they lived in safety in their land with no one to make them afraid. When I have brought them back from the nations and have gathered them from the countries of their enemies, I will show myself holy through them in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord their God, for though I sent them into exile from among the nations, I will gather them to their own land, not leaving any behind. I will no longer hide my face from them, for I will pour out my spirit on the house of Israel, declares the sovereign Lord. Earlier in the book, God has said, I will leave. The glory of God is in the temple, and then it lifts up and goes. God's people no longer have the presence of God with them. And God says that's not how it's going to be forever. I will be with my people. And the question I have for us tonight is, when does this happen? Because Ezekiel is set in a time of Babylon. And Babylon conquers the southern tribe of Judah. And the people are carried off. And then Cyrus, king of Persia, rips through Babylon. And the people go back in dribs and drabs. Some people stay in Babylon, even to the time of Jesus. Some people move back to Israel. Some people live in Egypt. And so Alexandria has copies of the Old Testament written in Greek. And so God's people, when Jesus comes along, are still scattered throughout the nations. God's people, the people of Israel, are still scattered through the nations, and today they are scattered through the nations. So when is it that the enemies of God will align themselves up against the people of God and be destroyed? Now, if you're an American president, you pay attention to this sort of stuff and go, maybe it's in my presidency. This is end time stuff. This is end of the world stuff. This is now, don't read literal Israel in here anymore. This is the people of God. And the people of God, when Jesus comes along, is not national Israel, it's Christians. We jump from Ezekiel 38 and 39 into the book of Revelation, which I'm not going to do tonight. I need about 5 more years of preaching before I touch Revelation. At least. But what we see here is the complete victory of God over everything. The complete victory of God. I was reading Colossians 1 with someone this afternoon. And in Colossians 1, you see Jesus is number 1. Jesus is head of the church. He is the image of God. He is all just phrase upon phrase upon phrase showing how big, how wonderful Jesus is. And Jesus is the one who wins this victory. What is it that comes against the people of God? What is our enemy? It's not a nation. What is the threat that is upon the people of God? It is death and separation from God. And the only reason that we do not fall is because of Jesus. Jesus takes the punishment for our sin. That is why we do not fear. Jesus is the one who dies instead of us. And so therefore we have hope. When we look at the faithfulness of God as he demonstrates throughout Ezekiel, throughout Jesus, we come to a place in Romans chapter 8. You might remember the Romans. They are these people who killed Christians. They fed them to the lions. Nero, happy chappy, burnt Christians alive as, lamps, so he could have garden parties. Remember that guy? So when Paul writes to the Roman church, this is a church that is experiencing persecution. This is a church that is in a city where he will lose his life. And I've got to say, if you're a Christian enduring persecution like the Romans endured, or like people in India are going through, or Pakistan, China,